We are on the page 54 on the section 2.7, and this section actually is in the intermediate algebra, okay, for solving absolute value inequalities. It's handy for you to have this knowledge for your stats class and math 154A and pre-calculus and beyond. All right, so let's see. Let's do some review first, and not on your paper, this part, okay, for the absolute value equations we did in your 152A class. Okay, so if we have absolute of x, right, equals 5. So we have absolute value equation. Then what kind of x can be your answer? We said can be 5, can be what? -5. Have two sides, right? Distance to the 0 can be either way, 5 or -5. Distance is still 5. Then if x equals 0, what do you think? Then x is 0, right? Then if x absolute value is -5, what do you think? Is anything take absolute value can be negative? No, right? So what's your x? It's no solution or doesn't exist, right? So those we discussed in your 152A class. Now we are going to do what? Inequalities. So inequality is like if x bigger than, say, 5. Inequality, right? Then can be what? 6, 7, 8, 9, 5.1, 5.2. Infinite answers. So we say for this one, for infinite answers, then you cannot show just by equals something, right? You need to do what? With a graph. So you say, okay, this is a 5. Anything beyond the 5, we do this way, right? Not including 5. So we do the graph. Or we do it what? With the interval notation. Starting from 5, not including 5, forever to infinity. So if we say x bigger than or less, greater than or equal than 5, then what do? We do 5. Instead of use parentheses, we use what? Bracket, right? So that's your answer. So we do bracket infinity. So we always write from smaller number to the larger number for the interval notations, right? So for the equations, you answer the x equals whatever. But for the inequalities, what do? We use the graphs and with interval notations, right? Okay, so let's see if we have this one. Let's see. Okay, so we want to graph all the numbers which make each inequality true. Write a math statement which describes the graph without using absolute value signs. Okay, so what do we try to do? If we try to say x big absolute value bigger than 3, that means what? That's your 0. Then x belongs to where? The distance away from 0 is bigger than 3. So x can be what? 4, 5, 6, 7 all the way, or even -4, -5, right? Because distance away from 0 is bigger than 3. So you look at it. So it should be what? Away from 0 should be here or here. All those places absolute value would be bigger than 3, right? So first, we will write in graphs for the solutions. Then next one, we will write in interval notations. Then here is what? -3 all the way to what? Infinity, negative infinity, right? So, but we have to write, so you have negative infinity and -3. But we have to write from the smaller number to the larger number. So you put a negative infinity on the left-hand side. And doesn't include -3, you use parentheses. Then here, for the infinities, you always use what? Parentheses. So for this part is this. Then for this part will be what? 3 all the way up to there, right? Then for two parts, for one answer, what do? We use the union symbol. So that's how we write it. Okay, to write your answer. Then it says, okay, also write a math statement like this, which describe the graphs without using absolute value. Okay, without using absolute value means what? X is here and X is here. That means your X is what? Less than -3, or your X is what? Bigger than 3, right? So that's how we solve it. By, if I have a greater than sign, that means my answers has two parts. Okay, y is the left-hand side is what? Less than -3, and another side is what? Bigger than 3. So you have negative side and positive side. Positive side is obvious, always bigger than 3, bigger than the number. Negative side has to be what? Less than negative number. Okay, so you will actually write the answer that way. This is a greater than. So if greater than, you will have two parts. All right. And if you have less than inequalities, including less than and greater than, right? Or equal to. So this part means what? Your X is within the distance of 3 to 0, right? Within 3, away from 0. So this is your -3, that's 3. So the answer should be what? Here, right? So not equal, you use parentheses. So your answer should be this. If you write interval notation, that would be what? From this to this. Everything in between is implied by the interval notation, right? So that's your answer. If you write a statement like this, how do you describe your X? X is between 3 and -3, right? So your answer is one part or two parts. So if it's less than, then the answer will be what? Will be only one part instead of two parts, right? Because bigger than is separated on two sides. So you have to write two parts with union sign to indicate. Okay, that means your value will be within the range of such thing. All right, that's how you look at it. So, however, if you have this one, you have something added to your absolute value. then you have to get absolute value by itself, then you can resolve it, right? So you will have absolute value greater than 2, right? So it's bigger than or equal to 2. How many parts you should have? 2 parts for your answer, right? So these 2 parts, one is beyond -2 on the left-hand side, and another one is beyond 2 on the right-hand side, right? So your answer should be what? That's your -2, that's 2. Bigger than, so your answer is here, answer is here, right? Then you have equal sign, that means inclusive with the boundary point 2 and -2. Then if it includes the boundary point, you will use brackets as a symbol. Then your answers have how many parts? 2 parts, right? One part is -infinity to -2 with bracket. Another part is what? From here to infinity. Then you use union, right? Then if you write in the inequality symbols to describe it, so you write it in what? X less than or equal to -2, or union means or, right? 2 to infinity with what? Oops, not the interval notations. We use what? Inequality symbol. That's your X bigger than 2, right? So if you have absolute value plus 1 less than or equal to 3, right? What do? Same thing. You minus 1 first, so your absolute value less than or equal to 2. Then you know your answer has 1 part or 2 parts. Less than 1 part, right? So you can just graph it. It's between what? -2 and 2 inside with bracket, right? If you, oh yeah, we have to write interval notation is -2 to 2, right? With bracket. If we describe it with X, how we are going to describe it? You only have 1 part. It's confined within -2 and 2. So you're confined with these 2, X is in between. You still write as 1 part, but you have 2 inequalities symbols, right, to describe the range of the X. Okay, so that's just individual X. We do that. So individual, okay, get absolute X by itself, right? So then you describe it. However, what happens if the inside not only X? So if like this, X plus 1 less than 3, instead of just X, but X plus 1 are bounded together. You cannot separate them because they are within a group. So you have to handle the group all together, right? So we say absolute value is a group symbol, right? So you have to handle the whole thing together. So this group, less than 3, it means how many parts? 1 or 2. Less than is 1 part. It's all within that, 3, right? That means what do we have? We have the X plus 1, this group is less than 3 and bigger than what? -3, right? So it's 1 part, like this. Then, how do we get X by itself? We have to isolate X and -1. If you do 1 you do all sides, right? Then cancel out your x is what? Between 2 and -4. That's how you find your x. Okay, so that's your answer for B. Then to describe where is x. Then how we are going to show the answer by graphing. So you have 2 and -4. One part or two parts? One part. In between, right? Then we do it with the interval notation would be what? -4 to 2 with parentheses. Okay. And this one, x plus 1 greater than or equal to 3. So how many parts we should have? Greater than or equal to, we should have 2 parts. Right? So 2 parts, this is the group. And this group, one side is what? On the positive side, another side is on the negative side or further away. Right? So it's saying, okay, this group is greater than or equal to 3, or x plus 1 less than or equal to -3, right? You have 2 parts. Then you have to solve it individually. So x less than or equal to -4, right? This one is what? Bigger than 2. So the first part is you have these 2 parts. That's your B, okay? Then if you show the answer in graphs or the interval notation, it would be here, bigger than 2, with bracket, right? Or less than -4 with bracket. Then how do we show 2 parts with the interval notations? This would be what? -infinity to -4 bracket, right? Another part would be what? 2 to infinity, right? Together, you use what? Union. You always, for the interval notation, you always write what? Smaller number to the larger number, right? With bracket or with parentheses. Either way, so you write it from what? Left to right. Okay? If we have a single absolute value, absolute inequality, then we solve this way. Okay? Then look next page. Page 55. So that's the concept we are going to solve, but sometimes it gets complicated, right? So first we want to get an absolute value by itself. Then within it, maybe, have something else, but you treat it as a group, you solve it. So the way to solve it, we always do what? We will isolate this one by itself, right? Just like you isolate your x. So because absolute value is a group symbol, so you take this group by itself, then decide what you want to do, right? Then we want to solve it without group symbol, right? Without the absolute value. So just write it like usual inequalities. So the next one we will do is we will rewrite it without the absolute symbol, right? We will remove the group symbols. By doing what? Rewrite it either one part or 2 parts, right? So if the inside, say it's less than 4, how many parts you have? Or if inside is bigger than 4, right? Then this side means what? You have 1 part. Then you will write what? -4 less than the inside, then less than 4, right? If it's bigger than, how many parts you have? You should write the 2 parts. Then you will have what? 2 parts. One is what? Inside should be less than -4, either further away from negative side and further away from positive side, right? Once you resolve whatever the inside is as a group, then you solve for x. Is that what we have been doing? Okay. So, that's the concept, and if you follow through, you should be able to do it, right? So let's review this. If absolute value less than 0, do you think it's possible? The distance from 0 is always 0 or positive, right? Distance. So that would be what? X is no solution. Okay? Cannot be done. So if you write x absolute less than or equal to 0, less than 0 is not possible, but can it be 0? Yes. So there is a 0 we fit in. Okay? If you say absolute value less than -2, is that possible? It cannot be negative, and even less than -2 is not possible. So x is what? No solution. Is that right? So we are analyzing the behavior and the characteristics of the absolute value. Can never be less than 0 or less than negative number, but possibly be 0, right? Okay, if it's less than, if it's greater than, let's see, x greater than 0. Is that possible? 1, 3, -1, -3, or 0, always bigger than or equal to 0, right? So your x is what? Any real number, right? Of course, that's absolute value. If absolute value less than 0, what do you think? Yes, but can x be 0? Usually, sometimes, yes. But other number, positive, negative number, all bigger than 0. So x can be what? Any real number, except what? You cannot be, because cannot be 0. That's what he said, not 0 there, right? If absolute value greater than 5, what do you think? Absolute value usually would be what? Positive or 0. That will always be what? Bigger than -5. So what do you think your x should be? Is that right? X can be any number, and take absolute value, definitely will be bigger than the negative number, right? So we take a look, if we just compare positive or negative for the characteristic of an x, for the absolute values, then you can see what kind of x it can be, right? Then for this one, absolute value less than 4. Just a single one by itself, less than 4. What do you think? Should we have 1 part or 2 parts? We did earlier, we should have what? 1 part, right? It's between 4 and -4, right? Or we write it this way, right? If we have this one bigger than 4, what do you think? We'll have 2 parts further away from 0 distance, right? So x can be what? Less than -4 and +4, right? So it ends up, what do? We say -infinity to -4, and here is 4 to infinity. Then we use union together for the two parts for the answer, right? Okay, if we have more complicated situation inside, let's review some equations first, right? So okay, it's possible to be 0, right? Can it be possible before? Yes. Can it be -4? No way, right? Because absolute value cannot be negative number. So for this one is what? No solution, right? Then let's see the first one. 2x minus 4 is 0. That means what? Inside has to be 0, right? So you do that. You plus 4. 2x is 4. Then your x is 2, right? Then for this one, if 2x minus 4 is 4, then we say you have what? The group has to be either positive side or negative side, but it's equal, so you have to write separately equals -4 or 4, right? Individual equation. Then you can solve it, right? So 2x is 0, so your x is 0 here. 0 is possible, right? So here is what? 2x is 8, so x is 4, right? So if you take a look, you check. 2 times 0, 0, 0 minus 4, -4. Take absolute value of -4, it's 4, right? And for the 4, 4 times 2 is 8, 8 minus 4 is 4, absolute 4 is 4, right? So we can check it that way. So what did we just do? We do absolute values inequalities. Then we solve it. If less than 0, not possible. Equal to 0 is 0. Bigger than 0, always, right? Bigger than negative number, always. For the inequalities, single inequalities. Then this one we are talking about for those single inequalities by it, x by itself, then you one part or two parts. But for more complicated equations or inequalities, inside you have more complicated situations, we need to rewrite it to one part or two parts, right? Equations, you just have equal. But the inequalities, you have to decide if it's one part or two parts, right? So we have this -0. Is that possible? Okay, so then 2x minus 4 less than 4 for the same thing. We have here it's equal to, right? Now we are doing the inequalities, right? So 2x minus 4 bigger than, greater than, can absolute value less than 0? It can't, right? So here is no solution. Then can be less than some number, can be greater than some number, can be less than negative number, absolute value equals positive or 0, right? So this one is no solution, right? Then for this one, absolute value can be greater than or equal to negative number? Of course, either 0 or positive. So x can be what? Any real number, right? For those conditions. Then for these two, you have 2x minus 4 less than 4, and this one 2x minus 4 less than, right? Can be less than 4, can be 1, 2, 3 inside, right? Then bigger than 4 can be 5, 6, 7 inside. So you have infinite answers. So we show it differently like those. So for less than, we say how many parts you should rewrite it to? Less than is what? 1 part, right? So this group should be what? In between 4 and negative 4. Then you solve the x by itself altogether, right? Get x by itself by plus 4, right? So that will be 0, 2x, right, 8. Then you divide it by 2, so your x is what? Between 4 and 0, right? Then you write it in interval notation, will be 0 to 4, like this. Okay, then for this one, how many parts you have to write? Greater than 0, 2 parts. 1 part is bigger than 4, 1 part is less than negative 4, away from 0, right? At least the 4 units away from 0. So you will rewrite it without the absolute value group symbol, right? So you will rewrite this and rewrite this. Don't change inside any sign of the inside, because the inside is the group. You compare the group with the situation, right? Then you solve individually. Plus 4, 2x, right? So you divide it by 2, x is what? Less than 0. Then here, plus 4, what do we have? 2x bigger than 8, divided by 2, bigger than 4, right? Then where's your answer? 1 part is this, 2 parts, right? 1 part is this. So this one is negative infinity to 0 with bracket. Then this one is what? Beyond 4, that will be 4 and infinity bracket. Then you do union. 2 parts answer. Then less than, you will have 1 part, right? Between 0 and 4, it's less than in between here. Then outside will be what? Bigger than. Right? Let's look at the more complicated situation. For stats, you might not need this. You might, okay? But for pre-cal or business calculus, definitely you need to have correct concepts for this. If you have this one, it's fractions. However, use the concepts, you should be okay. We say less than or equal to, right? Can absolute value less than 0? So for this part, no way, right? However, can it be equal to 0? Yes. Right? So when we write it at 2 conditions, one, we cannot do it, another one, we can do it, then we should handle the another one. So we say if absolute value equals 0, that means what? Inside has to be 0, right? Doesn't matter it's a fractions or the regular x, right? So what you do is, okay, this one inside has to be 0, so you can be total absolute value will be 0. Then how do we solve it? Times 3, right, cancel out. So 2x plus 1 equals 0, right? Then we solve it. What do we have? 2x plus 2 equals 0, minus 2. So we have what? 2x equals negative 2. X is what? Divided by 2 is negative 1. Right? Okay, even fractions, it doesn't matter. You should be able to do the same thinking with same thinking, right? So if we have this one, minus 7 bigger than negative 5, right? If less than negative 5, it's not possible. But we have to get absolute value by itself first. So you plus 7, so what do we have? Minus 1 equals what? Bigger than 2. Is that possible? Absolute value can be bigger than a certain number positive, right? Then it's greater than or equal to how many parts we should have? We should have 2 parts, right? One part is further away negative, would be less than or equal to negative 2. Another one would be what? X over 3 minus 1 should be what? Bigger than or equal to 2. Right? Then we will solve it. Plus 1, so x thirds will be less than negative 1. And this one will be plus 1, so bigger than 3. Right? Then we have to find out our x. To get rid of fractions, times 3, times 3, right? Then what do we have? X is less than or equal to negative 3, or, right, x is bigger than or equal to 9. 2 parts, right? Then also you will show it in interval notation. That will be negative infinity to negative 3, parenthesis for infinity sign, bracket here, and here will be at 9, right? Bracket to infinity, then with what? Union sign, right? That's how we show them. Okay, so this would be your intermediate algebra section 2.7. And this part we need to discuss and talk about it in case you take the next class. But you don't have a homework on this section. Just get some understanding so you can move on to your next class. We don't emphasize on this. We say this class will emphasize only one thing, which is what? Solving quadratic equations. Okay, so you don't have a homework on this section. And this will be our section, intermediate algebra, section 2.7.